Dear participants of the conference, according to the program, I am going to speak on some issues of implementation the principle of political correctness in the US media. The phenomenon of political correctness appeared in the United States in the late 60s of the 20th century. Its emergence is associated with the socio-cultural confrontation of certain groups in American society. The increase in public opposition by African Americans against the use of the synonym black to denote the black population of the United States led to the emergence of a linguistic and cultural movement that later went beyond the racial confrontation and became relevant to many sections of American society. Later, the movement was supported by feminist organizations. In the 1960s, the gender language reform took place. The reform was marked by purification of the English language from verbal discrimination on the grounds of sex, so-called sexisms. At the present stage of development of American society, the principles of political correctness are the basis for the selection of language tools that relate not only to the spheres of interethnic and intergender relations, but also cover other spheres of society. Political correctness implies the exclusion from the act of communication such language units that may discriminate against a person on the basis of sex, age, sexual orientation, mental and physical peculiarities, nationality, religion, political preferences, and so on. There exist several versions of the origin of the term political correctness. It has long been believed to appear in the works of Mao Zedong in 1960. However, the term first appeared in 1793 in the speech by James Wilson, a judge of the state of Georgia. Some researchers associate the emergence of the term political correctness with the name of the representative of the US feminist movement, Karen de Crow. Until now, this term is semantically ambiguous and refers not only to political life, as could be judged by the name itself, but also to other spheres of society. The principles of political correctness are being implemented, first of all, by modifying the socio-political vocabulary. Among the mechanisms of such modification is euphemization of words and expressions offensive to certain social groups. The principle of politeness underlies the formation of new euphemisms that hide physical and mental deficiencies. For example, cripple is replaced with euphemisms differently abled, physically different, handicapable. Euphemisms are also used in lexical and semantic groups that describe a person's age and race. In particular, instead of terms denoting a person's belonging to a certain race, euphemisms which are created on a geographical basis are used. For example, instead of Oriental, Asian American is used. Instead of Indian, Native American is used. As we see, euphemization is a kind of a taboo technique that avoids discrimination against certain racial and ethnic or any other minorities. Intensification of information influence as a result of development of communication and information technologies makes it especially important to adhere to the principles of political correctness in the field of mass media communication. In the US mass media discourse, special attention is paid to selection those lexical means which exclude any type of discrimination or humiliation, even a potential one. Politically correct terms form a special group of neologisms that are deliberately created by native speakers to replace lexical items which of any reasons are perceived as humiliating. In general, all types of politically correct units can be mainly classified as racial, gender, or social. And in other words, among the politically correct items, we can distinguish the following groups of lexical units. First of all, of course, these are racial. Racial political correctness is aimed at eliminating racial discrimination and discrimination through nationality and avoids any types of racism. For example, African American, Africans, Afros, all these words are used instead of offensive word the Negroes. These are, I must admit, the most frequently used synonyms nowadays. Let us open, for example, yesterday's CNN online news and come across a title. African American women react to Meghan Markle interview to Oprah. There are some other words denoting ethnic groups, for example, Asian American, Native Alaskan, and others. Gender political correctness includes gender-neutral lexical units and excludes sexisms. Here comes examples of replacement, gender-marked component to its gender-neutral alternative. Wait person is used instead of waiter or waitress. Flight attendant instead of steward, stewardess. Cleaner, housekeeper instead of cleaning lady. A member of Congress instead of congressman. Homemaker instead of housewife. Sales representative, salesperson, shop assistant instead of salesman or saleswoman. Spokesperson instead of spokesman, spokeswoman, and others. Social political correctness euphemisms are those that denote a person's physical or mental qualities and avoid using fetishisms, ageisms, diseases, lookisms, and other offensive words. For example, euphemisms for overweight people, larger than average citizen, medium-sized, person of size, a person of substance, person with an alternative body image, a horizontally challenged person, differently sized person. Euphemisms denoting older people, chronologically gifted, longer living, mature, seasoned, advanced in years. Words denoting mental inferiority, intellectually challenged instead of stupid, alternatively schooled instead of illiterate or uneducated, knowledge-based non-possessor instead of ignorant. Words to denote physical deflection, emotionally different instead of crazy, sexually dysfunctional instead of private, selectively perceptive, reality challenged instead of crackpot. Words denoting social phenomenon process, meltdown instead of crisis, gender reassignment instead of sex change, non-specifically destinationed individual instead of vagrant, cybernetically challenged instead of net addict, involuntarily leisured, economically inactive instead of unemployed, assault with a deadly weapon instead of cigarette smoking, ethnically homogeneous error instead of ghetto, academic dishonesty instead of cheating, negative cash flow instead of bankruptcy, non-traditional success, incomplete success, deficient achievement instead of failure. Words denoting mental well-being, material well-being, the ill-provided, the deprived, the socially deprived, the underprivileged, the disadvantaged. All these words are used instead of the poor. Thus, political correctness is manifested in completely different forms. The most common types of political correctness are gender and social, which include units denoting ethnic, physical, and mental qualities of person, as well as social phenomena. Gender political correctness advocates for the removal of the emphasis on gender and support women's rights. Racial political correctness is directed against racial and ethnic prejudice. Social political correctness serves to mitigate social phenomena and process. The phenomenon of political correctness has both its supporters and opponents. There are those who believe that adherence to political correctness principles will lead to censorship and loss of democratic freedoms. Besides, despite the importance of the role played by politically correct vocabulary in changing the norms of individual speech behavior, many linguists have criticized the artificial words and expressions that spoil the language. These are modifications such as melanin impoverished, denoting white person, domestic incarceration survivor, denoting wife, and other that sound ridiculous. The tools for implementing the principles of political correctness in the socio-political vocabulary are language codes, recommendations on style and word usage for the media, dictionaries, and euphemisms. The use of a taboo technique and euphemization allows to avoid confrontation in the society and influence social consciousness through the modification of the society and influence social consciousness through the modification of the lexical structure of the language. The current stage of social life development in the United States has reached such a level at which political correctness is not just a list of normative and legal documents and regulatory requirements. It is a lifestyle of the society. Refusal to follow this style can cause not only social condemnation, considered to be a biased person, but also prosecution responsibility. That is all I think to everybody.